What is depression?
Well, the psychiatric definition, I guess, is has a time limit. It's usually disabling. It's affecting the patient severely. It's a low mood or sadness. There's very little difference between sadness and depression except by a psychiatric definition. I'm not even sure what the criteria are to make it a mental illness. This probably has something duration and depth and disability.
Are there tests that you can take to
Only,
determine?
no, there's no blood test, no biopsy. In fact, for any of the so-called mental illnesses in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, there are no blood tests, biopsies, x-rays that make the diagnosis. It's just a series of behaviors, and then if you have enough of them, then you qualify for a mental illness diagnosis. But it's basically a normal human emotion, crisis events or losses, etc.
Right. I mean, if your car breaks down, it goes up, and you lose your job all in the same day, it would make you depressed, would it not?
Sure, that's right. But is it a mental illness is the question. And that's where they have to then say, well, if it's really deep sadness or if it lasts for a long time, then it's a mental illness. That's absurd, I think. To say that crisis events or feeling overwhelmed with economic stresses or job loss or family dysfunction or just any number of millions of things can cause a person to be despairing. And when you're also not sleeping well, oftentimes depression is related to being nervous about stuff. Nervousness and depression, or nervousness and sadness, are normal human emotions too. All these crisis events. But to make them into a mental illness, I think, is a real weak argument that leads them to drug use.
So that wouldn't necessarily suggest a chemical imbalance.
Right. The chemical imbalance is pure theory, unproven theory. They've been trying to prove that. The psychiatric and pharmaceutical industry has promulgated that theory, hypothesis, to explain plausibly why, in a simplistic fashion, why someone has a mental illness. Oh, you have a brain chemical imbalance. There's no proof of that. There are at least 60 different brain chemicals called neurotransmitters in the brain, and they all come from food. So we may well have deficiencies of neurotransmitters, but drugs don't do anything to cure deficiencies or depletions. It's food that would be the treatment for deficiencies or depletions. And then if there are actually 60 different brain chemicals, how can there be an imbalance there, or a measurable imbalance? It's impossible. You know, maybe if there were only 2 brain chemicals, then you could maybe say, well, one is too much than the other, and then maybe that would be an imbalance. But the treatment, again, would be nutrition and food and not a drug. Drugs do not, if anything, they may cause imbalances. We know that they can cause depletions. When you're on a drug for a while, for a serotonin, there's a serotonin reuptake pump inhibitor, for instance, like Prozac and Paxil, we know that they cause deficiencies of serotonin. The treatment isn't more of the drug that causes a deficiency. The treatment is stopping the drug or cutting that down and then replenishing the nutrient that's missing.
So the cure is more harmful than the condition?
Probably is, yeah. People who are on these drugs, even totally normal people, when they've experimented, there's a famous experiment that David Healy did in Scotland, where he took 10 totally normal people, gave them Zoloft.
Okay.
Within a couple of weeks, 2 of them were suicidal. 20% of them became suicidal. They were totally normal, never had a suicidal thought in their life, and Zoloft made 20% of them suicidal. They didn't act on it, but they were suicidal. So we know that they cause diseases, they cause mental ill health, and it's probably because they're depleting neurotransmitters or altering the brain in some way that we don't understand.
So it's not the cure for depression?
It's not the cure for it masks depression. Certainly, if a person was sad and they took cocaine, for instance, cocaine is an energizer. That would be a cure, so-called, or that would be a treatment for it. Yeah, it's an upper that treats depression or sadness. But it's a bad treatment because it causes highs that are abnormal, and everything that causes a high causes a crash. Get these up and down, uppers and downers. And so when you crash from amphetamine, then you might might have to keep taking your cocaine or your Ritalin or your Effexor or your Wellbutrin, all of which are uppers. So it's just a mistreatment of something that should be dealt with counseling, with avoidance of drugs, and nutritional supplements of various types.
So you say you can heal with food and supplements.
You can heal with food and supplements and good psychotherapy and solving the inciting causes for the sadness. You know, if you're going through a bankruptcy, it's absurd to think a drug is going to cure the bankruptcy. No, you can't. And neither, and of course, nutritional supplements aren't going to cure the bankruptcy or the dysfunctional marriage or the impending divorce or the loss of child custody, etc. That's absurd to think a drug is going to do that. It does alter the brain, so you're, you know, maybe you don't feel as caring, or you don't feel as much emotional pain,
as much anguish,
perhaps, you know, but that's not a cure. And then of course the other outcome that's never thought of at the beginning is how addicting are these medications, and maybe we can deal with that at another segment.
That's something to explore.
That's right.
Well, thank you very much.
You're welcome.